One, and we're live. Hi, everyone. I am here with John Ross. John Ross, you're the American WTC captain, a veteran of several WTCs by now, and a prolific TO in the States. And you just came back from Europe, not gaming related at all.
No, it was gaming related, but it was Olympics, right? It was throwing and swimming and
so lesser sports than the elevated sport of bolt action.
Well, now that breakdancing is in the Olympics, I don't see why miniature gaming isn't in. I think we should start a groundswell. I mean, you've got the audience here with your show. I mean, why not?
Why not? Why not? Yeah. I think perhaps we need a lot more people to play miniature games then, but well, if you take Warhammer and all the other miniature games into consideration, I mean, it's pretty big.
I would think it's bigger than ribbon dancing. I don't see a lot of people running the streets of Atlanta, doing that. So I think we're credible.
I think so too. Right. So what we're doing in these videos is that basically we're speculating about version 3. And one of the things that my commenters wanted us to debate was HE in version 3. So we already know that HE is going to ignore cover saves. So you and me, John, today, what do we think that will do?
Well, so they've, the cover save mechanic. So by changing the shooting phase so that you're not taking a penalty on your target, whether they're in cover or not, right? And shifting that probability back into the cover save mechanic. When they made that change, and we can talk about that in more detail, but when they made that change, if there's a weapon system that now ignores cover, it becomes significantly more deadly, dramatically more deadly. Yeah. But because before you were cutting down your probability on the to-hit roll significantly, going from a 4 to a 5, or in bolt action going from a 4 to a 7, right? Dramatic changes in the probability of wounds. So suddenly, if it worked exactly the way it did before, the to-hit mechanic and the ranging in, if everything was exactly the same, what just happened is a direct firing artillery weapon became radically more deadly than it used to be.
Yes. And especially, I think, if it's suddenly also because, I mean, you had weapons that ignored cover before, like snipers did, right?
Right.
But if you also ignore down, which is now part of the cover save, as I understand it, ignoring those two, like hard cover down, HE is going to be so massively deadly. And I'm predicting that autocannons, you shooting HE is going to be perhaps really, really good in version 3.
Well, it's not like they were bad before, right?
No, they were good before, but
they were great before. Yeah, it really is interesting. And again, it's a change in the statistics of the to-hit mechanic, which really shifts this. So again, presuming that they work exactly the same way that they do today, you take that artillery shot, a 2-inch artillery shot that hit 3 guys before using the template, and now your to-hit roll is probably going to be a 4. Because them being in cover doesn't matter. They could be behind a brick wall. It doesn't matter. And if they don't get a cover save, right, that's tremendously different than before shooting that artillery phase at someone in hard cover needing a 5 to hit. You went from a 50% chance to a 16% chance. So it's a dramatic shift. And then the thing that's scary about that is that given the change to the force org, which now allows you for a minimal basic infantry platoon tax of a lieutenant and a couple of cheap squads, now you can bring 4 artillery pieces.
You can have so many artillery pieces. If you take 2 rifle platoons, you can take 2 artillery platoons as well. I mean, it's insane the amount of artillery pieces, the amount of howitzers you could potentially put on the table. We don't know. There might be other limitations on your force organization, like how many doubles you can take or whatever. But just looking at the organization charts right now, you can build some very, very hefty gun lines, can't you?
You really can. And, it brings into my question, and I do want to talk about other rules that I kind of hope that they've changed in artillery, because that could be kind of fun. But it does beg the question of why, because playing playing a miniature game, mobility is fun, assaults
Yeah.
are fun.
Yeah.
Mobility brings in a lot of really fascinating tactics.
It
Gun
does.
lines aren't very fun to play, I don't think, and they're not very fun to play against. It's kind of miserable. And so, what's the thinking of making artillery more powerful in the game than it was before?
Yeah.
Which leads to the next tactic. Next, so one of they've made some very purposeful decisions to remove some of the gamey stuff in bolt action.
Yeah.
Like all the inexperienced second lieutenants running around. They got rid of that,
They,
which is good.
it looks like that's gone for
Yeah.
unless they're like still running platoon commanders that you can take those inexperienced. You might be able to do that. That's the cheapest version. And like I predicted in the last video I did, that we would see a lot of very, very cheap lieutenants, as cheap as you can get them. I'm considering putting pistols on my lieutenants right now because that's the cheapest weapon, and I just need to lower that tax because I need to get to the good stuff in other platoons, right? So but we don't know yet. We don't know how it's going to play out, but yeah.
So, Bo, if you think about it, in the spirit of trying to eliminate the gamey, inexperienced second lieutenant thing, or the gamey, the reducing the number of shots on tanks, which was a gamey kind of thing, and also the change to soft skin transports, which is really nice because it goes back to V1, because bizarrely a truck was amazingly survivable in V2.
Yes,
how many times you just shoot in a truck forever and do nothing, right? So they removed some game.
Battle taxis of version 2 was amazing.
So what I'd like to see is a change in the probability to hit with your artillery piece, indirect, based on the experience of the crew.
That would be really awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so a veteran artillery piece has a better chance of ranging in than an inexperienced piece, because that also eliminates the inexperienced medium mortar, which is really a gamey, silly thing, and it gives you an incentive to spend more for the veterancy other than just the to wound. I'd like to see that. I would hope we'd see.
Yeah, because again, it was one of those things where you would buy your artillery regular if you wanted spotters for it. You would buy it inexperienced if you didn't care and you just wanted to sit there and shoot indirectly. But typically, you would almost never see them bought veteran, right? Why would you ever take a veteran crew in version 2? Well, the only way you would do that is because you really wanted them to be survivable with a gun shield and sitting in hard cover, whatever. But typically, that wouldn't be worth the points. I really want that to be worth the points at some point, right? And giving them a little bonus to shooting when they're veteran, that would be a nice touch, I think.
Right. And in the spirit of how artillery really works, a veteran artillery crew. I mean, the tradition of the veteran Royal Horse Artillery that could deploy and shoot faster and had much higher accuracy levels, and all the tradition of artillery to have an inexperienced crew and a veteran crew hitting on the same, that just seems wrong too. It seems silly. So I'd love to see that change. I got another question for you though. Do you think that we will see a scatter dice and for misses on artillery?
No, I don't.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. A lot of the modifications, and you sort of touched upon this, the modifications to the shooting phase all seems to be simplifying stuff. So like this is your like you have the cover saves because you're defending. I have the to hit rolls because I'm attacking. They're trying to very like cut down and simplify. A scatter dice on artillery rolls, that would complicate things, and I don't see that happening, although I do think it would be relevant to do it. I think it would be realistic to do it, and I think especially for smoke, which was huge on the real battlefields, we haven't seen it used in version 2, but I think smoke, if they could make that a thing, would be really useful. Also because, I mean, all of a sudden, all the artillery pieces are really good. If you want to shut that down, you need to blow out some smoke. So I really want smoke to be good.
So if I were king, if I were Alessio's redheaded stepchild, I would have gone to the scatter dice, and I would be a scatter dice plus a D6 plus or minus some factor based on artillery experience.
Ooh.
So you still might get a hit, but if you get a miss, a veteran crew will have less of a miss than an inexperienced crew, and that in a simple mechanic. And in the spirit of Warhammer 40K 3rd edition, which a lot of our current rules feel a lot like that, right? So we've gone back to cover saves. You've got vehicles dying if they retreat off the table. I'll bet you we're going to see the same thing for troops that break from morale if they flee to the table edge. They're destroyed.
I am predicting that as well. Yeah.
These are 3rd edition effects. So going to the scatter dice for artillery hits could be a really interesting thing.
It could.
And I always found that a fun mechanic because sometimes it scatters back into yourself, or kind of crazy things can happen. So I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Final question that's all related to this. What do you think about the changes to shooting? Because you mentioned that somehow if you're ignoring cover saves, you see massively more deadly. But for some of us, the math goes the other way in some respects. Like shooting seems to be less deadly. It's more easy to pin people, way more easy to pin people, but it's way less deadly, I think, in some respects.
It is really strange. So I've been doing the math. And so if you take a 10-man squad with a light machine gun, assuming it still gets 4 shots, so 14 shots, which would also be the equivalent of an old Stuart.
Yeah.
So if you just take, I've got 14 shots, and you do different scenarios. So those guys are standing, they're going to shoot at short range against somebody in the open. Under the old system or the new, which is more deadly? And so so in the old system, you need the 3 pluses to hit because you're shooting at short range. So you have 14 shots, you're going to get a little bit more than 9 hits. And then if there are regular troops, you're going to get half of them are going to be wounded. So that's 4.7. You got 4.7 wounds in the old system. In the new one, because you're hitting on a 4+, it's only 3.5 wounds. It's a whole body, more than a full body less.
Yeah.
And so that's that scenario. But then if you change it to where you're firing against someone who was down in cover. In the old system, you would have only gotten 0.2 wounds, but in the new one, you're getting 0.6. Now, on the surface, that doesn't sound like much, but that's a 3-time increase in lethality.
Yeah.
Under this new change, and it's driving me crazy, Bo, because so if you want to get good at a war game, one of the beyond just learning the rules, you have to learn.
You have to instinctively know or really quickly do math in your head. What are the odds of this actually happening? Right.
Setting your expectations is the key. It's also really good for not being disappointed, because how many times have you seen a beginner rock up and they're going to shoot a bunch of shots and they think they're going to kill something and nothing happens, right? Yeah. And if you do the math with them, it wasn't likely for something to happen. Yeah. So being able to have a feel for how the game is going to go. And it's strange that when you do different scenarios with this, in many instances, the old system was more lethal. Yeah. Until you start shooting at people where you would have needed 6s or 7s to hit. And then the new model becomes more lethal, which just drives me like, why did they make this change? Why do you think they did that change?
I have no idea. I have no idea what the logic behind this is. I think it was just a matter of cleaning up. This is your responsibility. That is my responsibility. And then figuring out that as soon as they had done that, oh, wait a minute, if we still roll 3+ to hit, this is going to be, we're going to hit so much, so easily. So we can't do that. Let's make it 4+. And then the math was almost similar in most cases, and then it really isn't. So I think perhaps there's something like where they didn't think it all the way through, or I'm not sure. Because I don't think this is the deliberate, they want to do it like this. They want it to be that lethal in that circumstance in that one. I don't think that was the driving force here.
It's so I mean, people are resistant to change, and the change will force us to relearn, what's likely to happen when you do something basic. But right now it's really messing with my head, because in some instances, like if you're advancing and you're firing at long range, Is
Mhm.
it better or worse than it was before? What's much more likely to happen? And because of the weird cliff in the old system, where when you got to sevens to hit, you had this enormous reduction in the probability of
Yeah.
a successful outcome, because it's eliminating that 7+ in many instances. What I think will happen, I think my instinct says we're going to see the extreme cases will you'll be able to do more in the extreme cases than you could do before,
Mm.
but your lethality in normal shooting phases, like shooting someone in soft cover at range, will be less lethal.
I think
I
so
think
too.
that's really, really
Yeah.
weird.
It is weird, but it's just the change that's happening. We are resistant to change, as you said. Right. John, thank you so much for tuning in. And to you viewers at home, that was me and John talking about HE. We might be back for another video. So tune in again. John, I will see you in the next one.
Always fun. Talk to you later, Bo.